Now there's the worry that we always think of, Well, what about wildfire? What about getting off onto tangents? What about false doctrine? How do we avoid all of that? And what's the antidote? What if it gets going too fast and we can't stop something that's wrong? Speak to that issue.
Well, we can start with the early church and say there were places where it got off track, and Paul had to write a letter to the Galatians and be really stern. And there were places where he had to argue his point in the Council of Jerusalem. And you look at Wesley, and I was just reading recently that in Telford's biography of Wesley that smuggling was rampant in England. And when Wesley went to one place that had hundreds of people in a society, he said, look, no member of our society is going to either buy or sell smuggled goods. And so he presented an argument, and then the people who bought it, they stayed, and he lost 60, maybe 80 people out of the society because of his stand on a contemporary issue that was very unpopular. Basically everybody was doing this in England. But he says, look, we're going to do right, and we're going to keep going. And when we do right and keep going, God's going to bless the work. Right. So you have to have men, and I think George exemplifies this well, right, who will stand up and say, this is what's right, and this is the way it's going to be, right, and we're not backing down off of that.
Yes.
And yet, he does that on the basis of the Word of God. This
right.
is what the Word says.
Yes.
And so, there will be problems. This is not a silver bullet. It's not a magic solution. It's not the next greatest church growth solution. It does appear to be God's pattern for extending the gospel. And I think that even the American history of Methodism was largely patterned in this way, in which people came together in small groups for accountability, and they reached out to their communities and started as soon as a class was larger than 10 to 12 people, there was going to be another class meeting started. And Methodism exploded across the American frontier in largely the way in which George is describing the church's explosion in Honduras, India, China, Asia, and so on.
Yes.